Hello, everyone, and welcome. Thank you so much for joining us for our webinar today. My name is Christina from myosh, and I am so excited to get stuck into today's session. From data overload to decision clarity, practical AI for safety and risk. Now, it is so great to have you guys here. I just want to run through a bit of quick housekeeping first. So this session is being recorded and we will have time for a Q&A at the end. So please feel free to use that chat box throughout. We would love to hear from you. Now, we genuinely love seeing your comments and questions come through. So if you're anything like the most of us, or the organisations that we speak to, you're definitely not short on safety data. You've got your incident reports, you've got observations, investigations, dashboards. The volume isn't the issue. The challenge is the clarity. Now, when data is incomplete, inconsistent, or hard to interpret, the insights that matter most get buried and decision-making becomes slower and harder than it should be. So today isn't about AI hype. It's about how AI can quietly sit inside your system and help improve your data quality. It'll reduce admin effort and those surface insights. Most of all, it's so exciting because it's all being done without anyone needing to become an AI expert. Because honestly, who has time for that? I definitely don't. So before we begin, I'm very curious, and I know Adrian is as well, in the chat box, if you have any real life scenarios or case studies for things you would like to see AI do to improve your safety, please suggest those in the chat box and we will work through some of those together in real time. We've done that before and it's incredible to see what you all come up with and how it actually works. So we'll definitely keep those themes in mind as we go along. Now, I'm really, really pleased to introduce you to Adrian Manessis. Adrian has worked closely with organisations across all industries to make safety systems more usable, more practical, and more aligned with real operational needs. Today, he's going to walk us through how embedded configurable AI can actually improve data at the source. It'll strengthen investigations and reveal insights that might otherwise stay hidden. And he's going to show you exactly how it works in a live demo. So I'm going to stop yapping now and I'm going to hand it over to Adrian.
Fantastic. Thank you, Christina, and thank you everybody for attending today. First of all, I'm a little bit about myself. I've been working in the industry for 30 years with safety software, safety management software. I'm trying to get my tongue in the right place today. Where I'm currently working to embed AI to make it seamless into safety management software. So I'm working with a team of AI professionals, looking at customer use cases, so seeing what people want to see and where their challenges are, and then working out innovative ways of being able to do it with user to be able to use where appropriate. So I'm deeply passionate about the AI side of things, not just enhancing worker safety, but also driving productivity. So one of the things that people often forget is that if you improve productivity, if you make things easier, you take the friction out of work, in turn make it safer. So in turn, it has many results and many outputs, and people don't just see the system as an expense. It's actually something that improves the way you work within the organisation. Before we get started on the AI, and I'm not going to spend too much, I'm not going to kill you with a PowerPoint. I'm going to just go through a few, probably about 7 or 8, 9, 10 slides at the most, and I won't talk too much through those. Then I'm going to go straight into use cases. So I'm going to go straight into, as per what Christina said, how you could use it. So a few things you need to keep in mind is privacy when using AI. So I'm just looking at generic considerations at the moment. So many organisations are only allowed to use certain models. So it might be a ChatGPT 5.2, and it might be one that's specifically been sandboxed for them, or Copilot, any of those sorts of things. So one of the things that we've considered with what we've built is making sure that it's private, making sure that your IP doesn't get leaked out to the internet, and then, you know, obviously the ramifications from that. Other things like reasoning and tool usage, how much does the model think, what sort of tools can it use, are important. So sometimes you want AI to think longer, and sometimes you don't want to. So the longer it thinks, usually the higher the cost is, depends on the model. So they're things that you should be able to control. The context, being able to provide AI with enough context, enough information to give you something usable. So a lot of people are quite negative on AI because they put information in, they've treated it like a Google search, and then it just comes back with information that sometimes it makes up, and it also very confidently makes that up. There are ways around that, and if you provide it with enough context in the configuration, you can then make it so it's less likely to hallucinate, but you still have to be on the lookout for it. Another way of avoiding that is to keep humans in the system, to make sure you keep the humans in the loop. So you don't want the situation where, like I've seen with many law firms, where the AI is confidently talking about case law, and it's making up particular cases which don't exist and has embarrassed the people. So keep designing the processes so that humans stay in the loop. I've got an example where they don't stay in the loop here, by the way, and I'll sort of show you. It's quite a good example of it building something, but I would prefer to see the example where it actually guides you through the process and people make decisions along the way. So I'll talk about that when we get to it. So as we mentioned, you'll see some live examples, not just talked about, but built directly into how work happens. So instead of typing stuff into ChatGPT, it'll be seamless. It's built into your systems with buttons and so forth. So it's predefined. It's also going to show you how to embed configurable AI so it works so it can be used as a co-worker, not replacing you, and basically helping you do your best work. Okay, so let's look at some of the ways that AI can help. So analyze data to gain insights. I'll go through a case study of that. AI can assist directly within safety processes and guiding you to complete key steps. Automate tasks, so content generation. Build risk models, whether it's bow tie analysis. I'll go through a bow tie generation process today, but we're also go through the generation of a safe work method statement. But you could do a whole lot of other things. You could also, let's say you've got an inspection form, you might want, rather than having to build that form, you can basically get AI to generate the form for you, and then you can modify it yourself. So we'll go through that example as well. So the idea is embedded AI supports people, no technical expertise needed. It should be seamless, and embedding it into workflow enables everyone to use it safely, effectively and confidently, so you don't have to train your staff on how to do prompts and so forth, although you can put extra context in certain parts of it if you wish to. So I'll talk a little bit about what I mean by the word configurable. So it means it's set up without having to code. So I'm not a programmer. I've done some coding many, many years back. But all the examples I've done here, some of my colleagues have done them, I've done some of them, but none of the people who've done them are actually coders. You can build, when you can configure AI within the system, you can add your own use cases, and that gets back to the question that Christine was asking at the beginning about building your use cases into the system. And one of the things that I'm really keen on is understanding use cases, understanding what people actually want, rather than just making up things. So a lot of the use cases that I've done have actually come from customers and come from situations which I'll talk about throughout when I do the case studies. And also you can make it work based on your workflow requirements when you've got it configured, and integrated is probably another word, into the system. One of the things that I'll look at today is human and organisational performance. And many of the case studies will actually look at human and organisational performance processes. It's not rocket science for those who haven't come across it, but in my opinion, it's generating a lot of data. It can be quite difficult to implement but with AI, you can implement it quite nicely. You can get a lot more insights into the data that you're generating. So things like learning from work, controlling high energy risks, being able to fail safely, improve your productivity and safety. You've got things like, and the next slide actually comes into a little more detail, but you've got too much data coming in, and when you've got too much data and you're not doing anything with it, then management won't give you buy-in. They're just going, well, you're collecting a lot of data, but we're not seeing any benefit from it. So an example of, and I'll go through it shortly, but observation modules collect large amounts of data. I've seen lots of them in my time, from behavioural to other types. And usually the observation modules are just to get leaders out into the field and trying to say, well, the leaders are visible, we can see them, they're looking at what's going on. But the data that it generates is usually lost, and also trying to generate that data and answer fields in a form on a mobile device or whatever in the field is actually problematic. We're still not quite there yet. So we've got some interesting ways in which you can actually look at how you can collect data out in the field, and then how you can turn that into useful information and do analysis on it. So you can learn from the information from the field without having to type in lots of stuff onto a small mobile device. Okay, so I'm going to go from insights right through to a whole series of different things. So that's the end of PowerPoint for the time being. I'm going to jump over to let's get out of there. I'm going to jump over to a screen. I've got a series of tabs set up and a series of workspaces set up where I'll just go through different things. So
before you keep going, Adrian, I just want to encourage everyone, please feel free to add your case studies or anything you would like to see in the chat box. We'd love to hear from you so we can go through some together at the end of the presentation.
Yep, and any other questions that you might have as well. So in this particular case, what you can see is I've got a dashboard with tabs, and I've got multiple widgets, graphs, tables, whatever. And I want to understand a little bit more about that particular graph. Now, it could be a frequency rate graph. It could be, pretty much anything. So in this particular case here, I've actually already clicked on the wizard button, the wand, which is actually bringing up AI insights. So in this particular case, I'm saying we're a manufacturing organisation, analyse our top 5 hazards and identify hazard reduction programs. So I could have put a lot more information in there, and the more context you give it, usually the better. So when I click on generate insights, what that's going to do is it's going to go out to AI. It's going to look at the data that's in here and the data behind this particular widget, and it's now going to generate AI insights into that particular data. So the idea is you're producing a lot of data, you're looking at graphs. Sometimes you've got too many graphs to even analyze, but at least you can then start saying, well, what does this actually mean? What's the relevant information behind it? Now, I'm using a fairly high thinking model, so you can sort of see it's taking its time, and that will happen a bit today. Sometimes I might just go to the next slide and then come back, or next case study, and let it finish its job, and then come back to it later. In this case, it's finished it already. So in this case, it's come back with a whole variety of information about this. You could then potential causes. So it's giving you a lot more information, including recommendations and so forth. And I'm not going to read through all of this because it'll be the end of the presentation if I do. But essentially what that's giving you is the ability to analyze data. So you should be able to do that through, various different areas. You should also be able to analyze the data within modules themselves. And I'll actually get to that in a little while to give you insights. So I'm going to be doing a combination of doing insights into the data as well as generating data or getting it. In this next example, what I'm going to look at is I've modified a hazard to do an energy check. So in this particular energy check, what I've got is an attachment down the bottom of a particular work site, and it looks something like this. Okay, so I could probably have found better pictures and more close-ups and so forth, and I could have actually had more than one picture, but I just wanted to not make it go for too long. In this particular case, I want to do an energy check or an energy audit. So with energy-based assessments, typically what they're saying is anything that's over 1,500 joules is something that could kill people. So, but the average person isn't going to calculate, well, is that 1,500 joules in energy? So, but the AI can actually help you with that. So when I click on the energy check, what it's doing is it's looking at the picture. It can also be looking at other fields within the system. So this here is a button, and that button is being configured to say, well, what fields do we want to look at? What information do we want to give the AI, in other words, the prompt? And where do we want to output that data? So it's told it to look at the the various different areas. Now in this case, it didn't actually give me a great result. So I'm going to just click the button again. One of the things with AI is you'll find that it's non-deterministic. So what that means is you don't know, with computers traditionally you click a button and you always get the same result. With AI you don't, because it's looking at probabilities of next tokens and so forth. So sometimes if you don't get the result you want, either choosing a different model or and that's all configurable, or just running it again. And you can see here it's given me a much better result this time, and I can review it and just sort of see. So that's one of the things you need to look at with AI. You don't always get the best result first time up like I did the other time. So this is giving me a high energy control assessment. So it's saying there's rotating drill strings. It's telling me the energy type and source, whether it's visible or whether it's what the source is. Is there a direct control present? So if it saw a direct control, it would then tell me what that direct control is that would prevent someone getting entangled in that rotating drill string. So it's then gone through and then populated the rest of the details. So I could then go through, and a lot of the thing with high energy hazards, they're not always obvious. So things like heat or temperature, things like pressure, our brains don't pick up on. So our brains don't think about these things. We see something that's coming towards us. We see someone falling from height. We see the obvious things, but our brains aren't really geared towards actually thinking about all the different energy sources that could actually cause an issue. So by going through a process like this, and we're sort of working through this actual button a little bit further, so it's not totally completed, but I wanted to sort of show you the concept that you could be looking at understanding the energy sources and how you could actually be minimizing them. This next example I'm going to show you is, again, a configurable button. And in this case, it's saying, go and look at the fields, the relevant fields, in this case, the brief description and the details. And I want you to go through and suggest the temporary controls. So, for example, someone identifies a hazard in the field. In this case, it's loose rocks on a haul road edge that could come down and crush people or cause truck accidents, etc., vehicle accidents. So I'm going to just choose suggest temporary controls. So again, this will come back and it will tell me what are the sorts of things that I should be doing right now to control this hazard, or at least in the meantime, before we can actually do more longer term things to stop the hazard altogether. So it's telling me to immediately barricade both ends of the affected 15-metre section of the Western Haul Road. So it's coming up with recommendations, and of course they're recommendations. AI won't always get it right, so you need to review these. And I would normally put content in here to saying this is AI generated. Check carefully. Basically, is the situation there. This next one came from a case study. So this is an incident report, and in this particular case study, what happened is there was a major incident at a particular customer site. And the company didn't actually have time to, they didn't have a person on hand that was an experienced investigator. It was going to be an ICAM investigation. So didn't kill someone, but it almost did. The site, the customer was demanding that you fly there, you go through, you gather the information you need to do an investigation, and because everything's just stopped because it was very close to being a fatality. So that's sort of like the background behind the case study. So in this particular case, what I've got, if I can scroll there, I've got a sequence of events. So the sequence of events has been added to the incident report. So I won't go through the details of this one, but there's I think someone fell from a height or something like that. So the exact sequence of events were put in there. But what we need is the junior person going out needs to be able to collect evidence and ask the right questions. So all they had was a junior person. Everyone else was either on holidays or away or not available to fly to the appropriate location. So when I click on generate investigation questions, what this again is doing is it's generating content, but it's putting forward the questions that you need to be asking. So the prompt here inside here was basically saying, look, I need to create an ICAM investigation. I needed to consider all the aspects of the ICAM and so on and so forth. You need to look at the fields, and I want you to put in the answers into this field, and potentially it could even populate other fields if you wanted it to in one go. So that's now generating the investigation questions. And if you think about it, so why was John working at height without harness connected to a suitable anchorage point? So there's a whole stack of questions that they can be answering within here, and the answers to these questions could actually then be used in a button to help you actually generate the ICAM report, along with attachments, pictures, evidence, whatever else you captured within the system. So in this case today, I'm just going through and saying, okay, well, generate the questions that we need to ask to make sure we get the evidence and all the information that we need to get to be able to generate this. So you could have multiple buttons that could then use the information from the answers to do all sorts of other things in there. Okay, the next example I'm going to do, and I think this is a really good one, even just for general investigations, because over time the safety people used to just do the investigations and they were trained up. We've now got supervisors doing them and other people that are non-safety related. They might have done the training, but sometimes they may not do an investigation for quite some time, and they forget how to do an ICAM investigation, for example, or what questions to ask. So what this does is at least and allows them to complete the process properly, as opposed to getting an inferior report that just doesn't really give you a good example. Some other things that we're doing with investigations which relates to HOP or and investigations differently is for it to interrogate the system and figure out where we can learn from an incident. So in some cases you need to do a full-on ICAM investigation or some other type of investigation. In other cases, you might have something where you can sort of say, well, we've deemed it as a certain risk, but what learnings can we get from it? So then you could be using the same sort of thing, the same sorts of buttons and so forth there. Okay, so let's look at the next one. This is the one I don't like much, actually, but I only just put this together just purely to show you what it can do. I prefer a guided approach, and one of the things here is if you say, okay, what this is going to do is we've got some brief description, we've got some details of a swim that we want to create, and then it's just going to generate the swim for you. But that's where you can get yourself into a bit of trouble. So I'd prefer it to actually, and I haven't got the example here because it's going to take too long. I'd prefer it to guide you through the process. So I'd like to say with a swim, you need to identify the task, the steps in the task. So I think what you should do is get it to generate the steps, and then say once it's generated the steps and you've confirmed the steps, now go through and generate the hazards associated with those steps. Now, and then confirm those, make sure that they're correct, that it hasn't missed any. And then another button that says, okay, well now generate the controls, and then again get the person to confirm the controls. So by guiding people through the process, you're not getting someone just clicking a button like I'm about to do now and just creating a finished version, because people will generally be lazy and they'll just say, yep, AI's just built this for me, and they won't necessarily see any things that it's missed or any errors that are in there. So again, I'm just using this as an example of A, it can do it, but B, you need to do it responsibly. You need to make sure that you keep the human in the loop, you get it to guide through each of the steps, and that's the advice that I'm giving the majority of people. So that's actually going to build a completed swim. But again, it's not something that I would, well, at least it should. It didn't. I'll just try it again. I might jump to the next one if it's going to, oh, there we go. Okay, it did do it eventually. So it's got the step, the task, the activity, you can widen these columns and so forth. So it's got all the various different details in there of what you should do with that swim, including the controls or suggested controls and so forth. Okay, I did actually click it again when it already finished. So it's actually that bit's going to disappear in a sec. So that's building a safe work method statement. But again, I prefer to structure this in a step-by-step guide where you've got multiple buttons. Let's move on to the next one. This is an example of an observations module, but a very, very interesting observations module. Some of you may have heard of it before. It's called the 4Ds module. Okay, so the 4Ds module typically looks at, let's look at the form. What's dumb, what's different, what's difficult, and what's dangerous. So it's going out into the field and asking some very, very pointed questions to try to figure out basically how is work done. So, and when they're doing a task, rather than saying were they doing it safely, yes, no, which doesn't really tell you much, this is getting a little bit more information because the person out in the field knows their task usually better than anybody else, the work that they do. So this is sort of giving the information in your hands to find out exactly, what are the things that concern them, what are the things that go well, and so on and so forth. Now, the problem with observation, one of the things here is if you're filling all this out in the field, it's trouble, it's difficult. You're going to have to take shortcuts and so forth. So one of the things that we've got here is the ability, there are devices called Plord devices, and there's other different ones. Even your phones can do it natively, but you can basically capture text as you are out in the field. So you could be talking to somebody, you've got a microphone on you, you let them know that it's being recorded, it's capturing the transcript, it's using AI to actually make sure it's capturing it properly. So it's got a conversation. So all you're doing is going out, having a conversation with your workforce, with what's done, what's dangerous, what's difficult. You've got a series of steps to do. So it's captured it, it's been pasted into here, or even sent directly to there. And now what we want to do is we want it to auto-fill the rest of the form for me, so I don't have to go and fill out all those fields, or at least most of those fields. So when I click on autofill, it's going to analyze the content in that particular conversation that was recorded, and it's then going to put it into a structured format, so we don't have to go through and fill everything out. So it's actually done that now. So what was the task, the role of the person, the workplace insights. So it's looking at what was done, what was different, difficult, dangerous, what worked well, suggested improvements. And you can get more suggestions in there as well, so AI suggestions and so forth. So it hasn't filled out the entire form, but what it has done is it's taken the content from a conversation, a natural conversation, so you're not writing stuff down or filling things into a mobile. You're actually just talking to people, and that works very nicely. Okay, so from there, you've got to do something with that data. Okay, so let's have a look at how you could be analysing the data. So in this particular case, I've actually got a 4Ds module here. I've actually filtered out in a record list. So you can sort of see here there's a record list. I'll just take that out of the way for a moment. I'm going into here, I've filtered out what I want to see. So I've got a date range of 4D observations that I've done, and I've got fields in here that I wanted to actually capture. So in here, I'm going to go, okay, analyze records. Now, we're automating this process so it can automatically be stored in the system. It just sends you an email of the output. So people don't even have to necessarily do this. In this case, I'm just going through the manual process. So what I'm doing is I'm getting a specific information about what I'm trying to achieve. But again, we can have this predefined within the system and just automatically email the information off. So I've told it that I'm a 4Ds, workplace insights, entry, etc., giving it a whole lot of information about what I wanted to do. I wanted to analyse the records that are currently on the screen. And you can sort of see in here, it's actually working in the background to actually do it. Now, rather than make you wait for that to turn around in circles, I'm just going to go to one that I did beforehand, a bit like a good cooking lesson. And what it's looking at here is it's looking at analysing all that data. So remember I showed you on the previous one where we're capturing a lot of data through conversations. We do a whole lot of those observations over a period of time. We now need to analyse all that data that's come into the system. So this is telling me most improvement opportunities are system design issues rather than individual behaviour. Frontline workers routinely made harder by missing fit-for-purpose features on equipment, lack of handles, brackets, folding, and so on. Procurement and logistics are a major operational constraint. Slow approvals, long lead times, centralised warehousing. So what this allows you to do is go back to those parts of the business and remove those friction points. It allows you to say, look, we can see improvements in our business by looking at patterns in the conversations that we're having with people out in the field. Now, this has been going on for quite a while with people doing this, but the data generated is too massive. Trying to make head or tail of it is really, really hard. So what this does is it could be producing this report in your inbox every week or month or whatever period you want it to do. And then you can see the various different things that you need to do or where your challenges are. And then you can start working with different areas within the business to actually improve those. Okay, a very similar sort of concept here is, and again, this is getting back to the HOP principles, which is what I was talking about earlier on, human and organisational performance. In this particular case, this is like we don't want to just find out what's going wrong and what's going well when an incident happens, and that's typically what happens in most organisations. What we want to do is we want to find out people are doing observations and tasks or following procedures all the time. So in this particular case, there's a procedure here. There's, does the way we perform the task in the field differ from how it's outlined in the procedure? Are there any steps in the procedure where mistakes are more likely, etc., error traps? Are there any barriers? Psychosocial type, the more effort you do, the more likely you to have psychosocial issues with stress and so forth. So there's a whole stack of information that's been recorded by people as they do procedures. Again, it could be into a microphone or it could be typed directly into the actual thing itself. Okay, so then again, we can look at the analysis of the record. So we've got a huge amount of data. We need to analyse it. I can now go back over, and again, this could be something that goes into my inbox automatically, but I'm going to do the actual prompt in this case. So I'm grabbing the prompt itself from another screen. I'm just pasting it into here. And so I'm asking to analyse the various different data there. I'm going to choose Analyse Records. And again, that's looking at the procedures in practice. I've already done, it's actually, you can see that it's going there. I did one beforehand, again, just to save time. So a consistent gap exists between the documented procedure and field execution, with steps being skipped or modified when they are seen as impractical. Variability is a major driver of procedural drift. Mine rules and like banned items and client requirements routinely force deviations from written methods. High consequence error traps cluster around equipment interface steps, especially guarding interlocks, etc. So it's going through, and this is real live data, it's going through and looking at patterns and insights from out in the field. They're following procedures, but those procedures might be too complex, they might be too long, they might be, there'll be other things. Psychosocial load is most evident under time pressure, short runs, interruptions, and during complex alignment handling. So it can cover all of those sorts of things as well. So it's taking that really, really large amount of data, and what it's doing is it's then taking, analysing that data, bringing it into something that's readable, putting it in someone's inbox, and then you're actually learning, you're getting feedback, real feedback on what's actually happening with people on the front line. Okay. The next one I'm going to look at will be, and you can sort of see this one's still spinning around here, so that's still doing work. In fact, I think it only just finished, so I did the same sort of thing before. So the nice thing about this is you can let it do its stuff and then you can just come back to it later. The next component that I'm going to look at is a risk model. So we looked at SWMS before for planning tasks and so forth. What we look at here is a risk model called a bow tie. Now, bow ties, if you have to do them manually, they're pretty, usually you do them in workshops, and you should. I've worked on bow ties where the bow tie model with organisations where the AI actually came back with better results than what the people did, but you still need to keep the people in the loop. So sometimes you're better off getting the bow tie to generate it, giving it enough context, which is really important, and then modifying it to suit your needs. Okay, so in this particular case, I just put a topic here and I get it to generate the hazards and events. So that AI is actually generating the hazards and generating the unwanted events. Again, just to save time, so you're not waiting for it to spin around, because I'm using, in some cases, fairly high reasoning models. What it's come back with is falling from height from a ladder, and then it's come back with a series of hazards that are associated with that. By the way, I will explain the bow tie once it's built it, by the way. So I'll cover it in a little bit more detail once it's actually generated the bow tie. In this particular case here, we've got some custom instructions. So these custom instructions can actually be stored globally. So you can have, let's say you might follow the ICMM critical control management guidelines, or there might be other ways of in which the other methodologies that you're following, or you might have your own that you've modified slightly or even massively from the guidelines. So this is where you give it custom instructions, like maybe the model, maybe the sort of work you're doing, the context. So you're telling it that you operate whatever it is you do, in what sort of situations, what sort of equipment do you use, whatever it is that it needs to know. So again, that'll help it build more useful information. So I generate the bow tie, and I'll show you the actual structure of the bow tie in a moment. I think I did one beforehand, but I'll just let that build it. In fact, I can explain it while we're here. So the bow tie is really looking at a cause and effect sort of situation. So we've got what are the causes of the event from happening. So what's in the middle of this is the event itself, the thing that we don't want to happen. Now, people typically build bow ties for high-risk events. So the things, essentially the stuff that will kill you, but they're called material unwanted events, whatever you define as material. But usually it's for fatalities. But you could be using these bow ties now that you can use AI generation for pretty much anything. So you've got your causes on the left-hand side. I'll just zoom this up a little bit. You've got your ladder set up incorrect angle with unstable base prior to placement footing. Okay, so it's looking at that particular cause. It's looking at a whole series of other causes as well. It's then looking at what do you do before the event. So we've got a cause here. We've got some controls. We want those controls, or we may want some of these controls or more of these controls. So I can say, well, that one's not relevant, but I want to add my own in there. So still keeping the human in the loop. I'm not adding a very useful one in there, but that'll do for the moment. Okay, so in this case, I review. It's generally coming up with what's critical. The light blue ones are they're not non-critical. They're not critical controls. So let's say that's what you've done to prevent it. So I typically like to look at the example of a car accident. Someone's speeding. You put speed limiters on. You put police to speed, to stop people from speeding, and so on and so forth. You then have the event. So if those controls fail, that's the event. The speed, in this particular case, in the example I'm giving you, the car crashes. And then what do you do to fail safely? What are the mitigating controls? So in a car, it would be things like seat belts, airbags, those sorts of things to stop the consequence of the fatality. So in this particular case, it's falling from height. It's coming back with things like fall arrest systems and a whole series of other things. And then on the far right-hand side, the consequences. So if the mitigating controls fail, then what happens after that? So your preventative controls, they all fail. How do you fail safely? Let's say they fail, then you've got the actual unfortunate consequences that come out of that. Hopefully that doesn't get to there. So the idea with these sorts of things is these can become back-end documents within the system. So you can create your control library once you've finalised this. So again, keep the human in the loop. And then once you've got the human in the loop, make sure that they are analysing this and making sure they've sense checked it, they've removed or modified the things that don't make sense, and they've built it to the way it needs to be built. So again, it comes up with content, you've got to double check it, and then it can be used to build your control library, and then you can verify your controls. We won't cover that today, but then where you've got a critical control, you need to make sure that that control is actually functioning. So it sets you up for the process of identifying controls, how you then manage those controls. Now, the other thing you can do there is you can also do things like, let's just open up let's looking at, I'll see if I've got a fall from height or something that's got something reasonable in it, or even not reasonable for that matter. So the other way you can also use AI in this particular case is you can do things like, that's not a very good one, but that's okay. Let's see if I can find a better one. Let's do, say, a different falling from height. I thought I had some better ones in here. Hopefully I'll find a decent one. If not, I'll leave it, or I'll just explain the concept. Okay, that's even worse. Okay, one more try. Falling off through a work platform. Same sort of concept. So I'm building up, so some of those were built manually, they weren't built through AI. Okay, again, not great, but I'll live with this one. So in here, I can also do things like use AI analysis to then identify the control that the bow tie I've got in place, and then hit OK. So what that's now doing is it's analysing the event, the controls, and now it's coming back with recommendations as to what I've missed, which is a lot in this case. So I should have more causes, better controls, some critical controls in there, and so on and so forth. So that's going to run that analysis background, and then it'll give you feedback on the bow tie you've done. So when you build the bow ties, you get AI to build it, you could then modify it, and then you could get AI to analyse it, and just to make sure that you've got that it's coming back with the appropriate feedback. Okay, the next let's just see if that's, I'll just give that a second. If it doesn't come back with anything soon, I'll just leave it. But it's basically just a text box that comes up on the left-hand side here that will actually, again, it's a high thinking model in this case. It's probably coming up with a lot of holes in this particular bow tie diagram, but it will come back with some information shortly, hopefully. Maybe I'll just leave it to its, okay, just as I was about to threaten to say I'm not going to do this, it's come back. So it's come back with, things that you should do, left-hand side mitigating, right-hand side, left-hand side. So it's coming back with a whole series of different things that you could be doing there that you haven't included, or things that you could change within that particular area. So again, AI basically analysing what you've done, coming back with suggestions. Okay, so let's look at the next component, and this is getting to the last one, and before we go off to questions. Typically, companies need to build inspection forms. So in this particular case, you might have, pre-start inspections, you might have forms that you need to generate to be able to collect data. So what we can do here is we can actually upload files into this particular case. So what I've got is a psychosocial form. I'll see if I've actually got it in PDF. I thought I had it loaded somewhere. No, I didn't. Okay, that's okay. So what it is in this particular case, it's just a PDF form of a psychosocial risk assessment. So I'm going to select that, and it's uploaded into there. Now I can give it further custom instructions if I want to. So I might want it to change some of that form, or I might want to do something slightly different. So when I select generate form, what that's going to do is it's going to generate a form within the system. So in this case here, and allow me to then modify it thereafter. So this is actually building the form itself, the data, getting you to be able to say, well, I need to build this form into the system, and I need to collect the appropriate amount of data. So I'll just let it do its stuff. It might just take a minute or so, or hopefully less. And then we can have a look at what that's actually produced. Okay, so I'll just let that wait for a little while, and then if it's going to take too long again, I'll move on to questions. But I'll just give it another, half a minute or at most. Usually, if I threaten it to move on, it usually actually moves on quite quickly. So it's taking a little bit of time, but essentially what that's doing in the background is it's building a form from a PDF or a JPEG. Okay, in this case, it actually decided not to do it for me anyway. So I'm just going to give it one more shot, and then just add AI add, and then I'm just going to give it to do like a whatever. I'll just choose any of these. That's basically kind of copying an existing form for the workflow, and now this is actually doing the actual questions within the item. So I'll just get it to generate again. Let's see if that'll do it, and if not, I'll give up while I'm behind on that one. But essentially the idea is that it's generating forms, it's generating content. I might have the wrong model set up there. So I know that you need to have like some models work better than others. So some models like ChatGPT 5.2, for example, might work better than say Gemini, a particular model from Gemini, or vice versa. So in some cases, we have the ability to be able to say, let's choose the model that we actually want to use for the different parts of the system. So that way you can then say, well, I want a different model. I want a really high thinking or high reasoning model, or I want something that's going to do something really fast and really cheaply. So in this particular case, if it fails that again, it probably just means I'm using the wrong model. But basically what that will do is once it's generated, is it will actually build that form for me, as opposed to me having to manually go into a form builder and then add the fields myself. Okay, give that a few more seconds again, and then we'll move on. Again, I'll quit while I'm behind if that doesn't do it anytime soon. I might actually have one I did earlier.
Just like we said, this is a live demo, so there's no smoke and mirrors going on here, guys.
Yeah, warts and all, any errors that it throws. But again, AI is non-deterministic, and sometimes it will, if the API or if the model is even down for a moment, it can also have failure. So there is some external influence on this process as well. So just give that a moment, and otherwise we'll go to some of the case studies if anyone's brought any up or anything.
I think they have. I think an important point to make at this actual time is, like you guys always say, it's very important whilst AI can do all of this sort of stuff, it's that human element is so integral to this as well. Like, we need to ensure that, yes, we're utilising AI to its ability, but we're also still learning from it and putting our own input and insights in there as well. It's not foolproof, obviously.
So in this particular case, it actually has worked, and what it's done is it's actually built the form out. But you could then modify this form. So it's a form builder. You could add extra fields. You could do all sorts of things. You could save this form out and so on. So and change workflow and so on and so forth. So you can add extra fields. You can do whatever you want to do there. So it's actually built the form out, and I was able to take a form. I could have just typed in a description of a form. I want a form that does X, Y, Z, and it would have done the same thing. So at least you're not starting from scratch. You might want to check it and so forth. Christina, are there any questions that have come through during the session today, or any case studies that people wanted to talk about?
There has been. One of the questions that have come through from, oh goodness, where has that gone? From James, who has asked, can this generate monthly reports to summarise incidents, hazards, status, etc., safety notices for distribution, notifications based on specific criteria for each?
Yeah, absolutely. So that's exactly what the Analyse records was in fact doing. So the Analyse records, I showed it to you manually, but we have the capability to have a prompt in there that can say, look, I want you to generate the data, and I want you to email it to these people with the report with the appropriate in this structure. So the idea is you can get the AI to be able to do that analysis for you and then send it to someone's inbox without them having to manually run it, or alternatively, you can just choose Analyse records, put in a prompt, and then it'll go and do it. So it'll depend very much on the prompt that you use or that has been put into the system. But again, that's completely configurable. So that's something that you can do. So yeah, absolutely, that's a really good use case. Essentially going through, looking at various different aspects of the system and coming back with summaries or whatever you want it to. So essentially it's putting in the prompt as to what you want it to actually do in that sense. So yeah, that's a good question and a good use case.
Chris has written, can AI help to identify the minimum legal requirements for a new process and then transfer those legal requirements into a draft RA or a SWM and internal training?
Yeah, absolutely. So again, it would be what I would be saying there is it's similar to some of the buttons I showed on the form before. So you'd basically have, okay, this is a process. We have a button on the form which has a prompt in it that actually then says, this is a process we're about to do. It gives it some context for what you do, what your organisation is, where you're operating. So you might say we're operating in this state or this particular country or in this particular industry. now I want you to come back with legislative requirements for that particular area. Again, it is AI, and I wouldn't totally trust it, but at least it's going to give you some things to look at. And it is getting better and better. So I'm noticing, especially in the last couple of weeks, that the information coming out of the different models has actually been really, really good. So that's another classic example where you would have some fields on a form. So basically those configuration buttons, what they can do is they can take the information from fields on the form, you put a prompt inside it, you ask it to interrogate that information or look at that information on those other fields, and you then tell it to say, well, I now want you to output that information to a legal requirements field, for example, and then that'll actually do it, and then you just test it, and you might improve the prompt. But the idea is, once you've got that prompt working reliably with the model that you want, you then can try it out with different scenarios and test it out, and then once you're happy that it's working, it will then give you a way of producing that. But again, I do stress always look at the information that's created and do a sense check on it. Use critical thinking to say, well, I know these things don't always get it right. I can't 100% rely on it, but yeah, it is a use case you could certainly do.
Another one is, could AI prompt users when their incident descriptions are too vague or incomplete?
Yeah, I actually look at that even for our internal processes. So again, you can have them complete details of the incident. And then you can then have a feedback field that says, essentially, suggest improvements or something like that. And then they have to click that button. When they click that button, it'll come back with the suggested improvements. In other words, what you put in there is too vague. You need to make suggestions as to what rules as to what they could follow, and then they could click it again. So you could have a button on a form that could look at what they've entered and analyse what they've entered, and they could do the button themselves and self-fix it themselves. So it would give them the relevant information to basically say, well, the stuff you've got here is too vague. You need to make sure that you keep it succinct, but you've got to include this, that, and the other.
I feel like that might help the user learn on a more intimate level as to what to do the next time they do this and make it even better again.
Yep, we actually use it on our own internal processes. Similar sort of thing. So let's say someone logs an incident, as in a IT incident where something's not working or whatever, and you click a button. You can click a button in our own internal IT incident form that then says, okay, well, what is actually needed? What have you provided? What have they provided? And then a button that comes back with, well, you really should have given let's say it's an issue someone had. You need to record a recording, or you need to provide the exact steps to reproduce the issue. You need to do this, you need to do that. And it can then provide all that information in that suggested output field as to, this is what you need to provide, and you haven't provided that information yet. So go back and change what you've done. So we're using those things internally ourselves for our own IT incidents, but you could be using that for your hazard reports, any of the forms that you're looking at, to basically improve the quality of what people are putting into the system. So yeah, it's a really good use case of improving the quality of the input, as opposed to people just putting in rubbish and then you're going, well, that tells me nothing. It's wasting. Not only have they put in rubbish, but it's also wasting everybody's time, and they don't necessarily know that. So the buttons themselves can actually be configured to say, look at what's been entered, look at these fields, and even tell them where a field doesn't make sense. So one interesting example that I looked at was, say, an incident report where they chose injury and near miss as outcomes on the same incident report. And the AI came back and said, that doesn't make sense. How can you have an injury and a near miss? It wasn't a near miss, it was an injury. Maybe there's some other outcomes as well, but it then can come back and critique what was inside that before they submit it and make sure that it's done properly. In fact, there was actually one case study that I forgot to actually show. It might be worthwhile just having a quick look at it. If I can just come back to it quickly. I knew I missed something today. So I'm just going to jump back to one of my other documents. So let's say I go back to say I'm going to go back to say an incident. So what you can also do is this will also help out with an incident report. So we've got a fork, and I'm just choosing one randomly here, so completely off the cuff. I've got an incident that's been entered into the system. Not a lot of information into that one, so let's just look at a step. So I'll just look at one that's been a little bit more completed. So in this particular case, what it's going to do is it's going to look at one that's currently pending sign-off. So let's say I'm at a situation where I want to sign off an incident report. So this will look at the quality and look at some things that I need to be to worry about. So inside here, I can say Analyse with AI. So what this is actually doing is it's doing an analysis on the actual incident report to summarize, but not only just summarize, but also sense check it to make sure that, and now this isn't just incident reports, it could be any document that's in the system. But it's producing that analysis. I might come back to it in a second if it's going to take, I'll see how long it takes. But what that's doing is it's essentially doing a sense check, quality check, looking at things that don't make sense within that particular area. So even if they do enter stuff, you want to be able to get the AI to actually pick up anomalies, issues, things that don't quite make sense. So this is a high potential, low severity accident, blah, blah, blah. The incident involved multiple, blah, blah, blah. Substandard accident conditions are clearly, okay. So if there were issues with this incident report, you could then look at this and you could decide whether you want to sign off on it. Or you might see some things where you say, well, it hasn't identified root causes or associated actions or things that you should have done before you actually sign off on it. So again, another example of getting it to look at the quality of the data that's being entered and then improve the quality. I think it's a really, really big use case with an AI.
It's incredible, and it not only does it save time, even though it does take a few seconds or even half a minute for things to load sometimes, that is saving you not only physical time, but like the mental energy and all of those other things that are going to enable you to be able to work smarter, work more efficiently, and action so much more just from this being in this system. And it's just incredible. We're so excited by everything that's here. There are no more questions, Adrian. So if you would like to wrap up, that would be wonderful.
Yep, absolutely. Let me just get my presentation back up again. And okay, so in summary, AI enhances safety, workflows, quality of work being put in. There are practical applications already being delivered in the real world. The configurable AI adapts to each organization's context and processes, and that's really important. It's not just like you see a lot of rubbish AI where it just summarizes and it's not adaptable. It supports learning from work and continuous improvement. I think that's a really important point. And it keeps people central while reducing complexity and effort. So I think, to me, I can see that it's making a massive difference, or can make a massive difference to organisations, as long as you do it responsibly and in a way that finding your own use cases, finding the areas where it can improve your business. So I think that, to me, this is one of the, as I mentioned, I've been working with safety management software for 30 years. This is the biggest change that I've seen in 30 years by a mile. And the biggest thing that's making a massive difference to organisations in their workplace, with eliminating that information overload, improving the quality of work, putting in use cases that make sense to you, that help operational learning. So all the methodologies that I've seen people frustrated with because they're trying to get information, they're trying to do them, but they're trying to learn from your organisation is really difficult. There's things that you can do that now, which is just fantastic. This is my business card, by the way. So if anyone does want to swap contact details and have conversations at a later point, I'm always more than happy to talk to people. So feel free to scan that. and you'll get my contact details, I'll get yours, and then I'm happy to continue conversations. I appreciate that these webinars are not always a good place to, go through everything that you want to talk about. But really appreciate everyone's attendance today, and hopefully this session has been useful.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Adrian. And as someone who manages Adrian's calendar, much to my disgust, that is actually his contact number. So please don't bombard him, but also please bombard him. He's always a yes man and very happy to help, even when he has zero time. So that's why he is who he is and why he puts so much effort and passion into these sorts of things for you guys. So please reach out if you have any questions whatsoever. I will send out a copy of this recording to everybody who registered, as well as pop it onto our socials. It will be available on Spotify and Apple Podcasts as well, and on our YouTube channels too. So we will be in touch, and look out for the next webinar, which will be on CCM. All right, thanks guys. Have a great day.